Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm sure that more people will join us, but we can start now, I think. My name is Marta Fernández de Alarcón. I am the Secretary General of the Spanish Business Council, and I want to welcome you to this webinar about Africa's business landscape with one of our members of the Chamber, Gulf Business Consulting, providing valuable key points into the market opportunities in Africa and in collaboration also with the Spanish Business Council of Qatar. As you may know, Gulf Business Consulting stands for Qualified Business Development and Professional Advice in the Middle East region for leading companies, governments, and institutions from all over the world. And we are pleased to count with them in the Chamber. I am delighted to present today for this webinar Aden Yisen Gao, sorry for my spelling, Business Development Africa Market. And also I want to say thank you for your collaboration and support, and as much collaboration as we have from all our members, as much we can share and we can have the richness of the chamber. I give the floor to Fina Sandoval, which is the Secretary General of the Spanish Business Council of Qatar, and she's going to say some few words.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks. Thank you, Marta, for having the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in Qatar for this webinar. It is very interesting for all our members. And thank you to all the attendees of the webinar. Now I will pass it over to Ms. Aden, and thanks for your collaboration in this webinar. When you are ready, you can start. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for having me and taking the time to listen to some of the African business landscape information and some opportunities and entry pathways that exist. As mentioned, my name is Aden Yizangao. I work on behalf of Gulf Business Consulting, and what we do is we do a lot of B2B, but in the GCC area, region, and now we are expanding to Africa, and this is something that I am very passionate about, and so we can discuss a bit more about the opportunities and entry pathways that exist. Main thing that we're going to go through in this webinar is just introducing, understanding, and navigating Africa as a market in terms of the different countries and the different market values that it has, as well as understanding the business culture and ways to navigate doing business in this region. We'll also have a little time for any questions that you may have. The first thing that I want to make very clear is that Africa is a huge market. Okay, it's an insanely large market that's fragmented into small pieces. There are it's a nuanced place. 3,000 plus tribes, 2,000 plus languages. So it's home to 1/3 of the world's languages, actually. And some of its population is under 10 million. And then there's some countries like Nigeria and Ethiopia, which is where I'm from, Ethiopia. That's my city, Addis Ababa. And those countries have populations over 100 million. And so geographically as well, the continent is massive. Its square kilometers is around 30 million. So that's enough to fit US, China, India, Japan, Mexico, and many European countries combined. So it's a vast, vast region. The maps don't do it justice. And then as well as economic growth, like there is no, the average growth is gross domestic product growth in Africa is around 3.8% in 2022, which is actually lower than what it was in 2021, which is, in line with the rest of the world. And although there's been multiple shocks in the region, the average growth has been projected to be 4.1% in 2023 to 2024. So bear this in mind. This is still way above the global average growth rate of 2.9, which the IMF has estimated for 2024, from 2023 to 2024. So yeah, and there are different regions within the different countries within the region have different economic growth rates, of course, and as well as regulatory rules. Their regulatory, the African regulatory system is different, not only on the country you are working in, but also the region within the country. So that's very important to understand. Trade rules diverge in terms of competition, investment, and intellectual property rights. So all these is like to keep in mind that Africa, although this webinar is called Africa's Business Landscape, Africa is vast, and there are many nuances, and there are many things that you have to consider when talking or thinking about Africa. Some key points that has made the region a key talking point for a lot of the world right now is that, first of all, 70% of Africans are under 30. So there is already a growing demand, and this demand is it's projected to even grow. So there's a lot of untapped market that is waiting in that region. Also, with a population under 30, there's a huge population of tech-savvy youth population, and it's like countries like Kenya have become a hub for outsourcing tech jobs. I'm sure you know companies like OpenAI, the company that's behind ChatGPT, actually outsourced a lot of its tech in Kenya. And again, there's this growing momentum in a lot of East Africa, but also West. Also, another aspect is that African countries have improved, 40% of them have improved their business environment. This is according to the World Bank. There are some countries like Zambia, Rwanda, and South Africa have been always in the highest category in terms of ease of doing business. And there are other countries that are also growing and improving. Also, lastly, by 2050, Africa will be home to 1 in 4 people. So to keep this in line with this idea that the region is vast, we also have to understand that it's potentially untapped. You know, there are so many companies and countries trying to enter the market, but with this growing population, there is there's a diverse range of consumers. And in line with this topic, really trying to get across how the economies of different African countries operate, okay? There is no one Africa. I've tried to separate them into 3 different groups. The first is the steady performers. Steady performers have grown consistently over the past 20 years, from around 2000 to 2020, more or less. These countries have a GDP growth rate of over 5%. Steady growers include Ethiopia and Rwanda. These countries have alleviated a lot of their absolute poverty rates and also improved their urbanization and global investment rates. But bear this in mind, these countries also start from a lower base. Therefore, because of the way that economics works, a lower base equals a higher growth rate. So that's something to keep in mind when you hear about the GDP growth of these countries. So other countries in this category include Mali, Zambia, Sierra Leone, Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique, Burkina Faso, Niger, Tanzania, and Ghana. Though these are amongst the steady performers, also some of the countries that have that are easiest to do business in. And then we have the current propellers. So the current propellers performed lower than the African average in terms of GDP in the first 10 years of this decade, in the first 10 years. So from 2000 to 2010, and then have increased notably in the past 10 to 12 years. So surprisingly, most of these countries are in West Africa, except for 2. And the nations have improved a lot of their urbanization and export rates, which is what is leading to this faster economic growth in the past 10 years. Yeah, so these countries include Zimbabwe, Cameroon, Mauritania, Senegal, Benin, Togo, Guinea, and Cote d'Ivoire. All these countries, like I said, are most except for two, except for Zimbabwe and Cameroon, are in West Africa. So that's something to bear in mind in terms of the rate of the growth of GDP in different regions within Africa. And then there are the slower growers. So actually within the slower growers, you can further separate it into two groups. There are some countries that have experienced a slowdown in the past from 2010 to 2019, although they were growing above average before that in the first 10 years from 2000. And these are the major economies of Africa: Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria. They house about 37% of the African population. And the reason, and with the idea of slower grower, you still have to bear in mind, this is the African average. So they are growing at around 3%, which is still much higher than the 2.1, 2.9 that the average global growth is at. And also, when we say the reason that they have slower growth is because they are amongst the highest urbanized level countries in the region. So still not as urbanized as the Western economies, but are the highest in Africa, therefore are growing at a slower rate. And in contrast, there are also smaller countries and economies that have just not been able to grow. So out of the 15 countries in this category, Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria are the slower growers because they have a lot of urbanization. They are quite modernized and therefore are growing slower because most of their gaps in the market are starting to be filled. Still not as much as the Western society and Western economies, obviously, but compared to the rest of Africa. And then there are also 9 of the smallest economies in this group, which overall grow at a really sluggish rate, and the number of people living in poverty in those countries have barely reduced, basically. So in this category, bear in mind some of the biggest and some of the slowest and the lowest rate of growth. And then now we can also discuss the key industries in this market. Obviously, there are some markets that have been catching the world's attention. One of this is obviously agriculture. Surprisingly, Africa imports around $45 billion worth of food. So the continent is actually a net importer of food. And this brings about 2 opportunities. One is obviously exporting to Africa. There's a growing population, as I mentioned before, and those people need to be fed, and a lot of exporters are doing the feeding. And then another opportunity within agriculture is that because of this growing demand for food, as the population grows, the governments are really investing more into their agriculture. So there are a lot of Western companies coming to try to fill that gap, not only in ways of farming, but also in ag tech, in agricultural supplies and other services provide an opportunity to fill the sector. And it's an industry that a lot of Western companies are trying to find a way into. Another large industry or a key industry in the market is logistics. So logistics are set to deliver results as in the next coming years, as some African nations have signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, or the FTA, And this agreement basically is to reduce the trade between African signatories and these. And so this obviously brings an opportunity for Western businesses or businesses outside of Africa to not only be able to sell their products in one country or one region, but a lot of the regions that have or a lot of the countries that have signed this AFCFTA agreement. And this is obviously a catalyst for rapid investment, and a lot of governments are actively investing into their logistics, and therefore companies that are in line with government goals and aims obviously tend to do well in Africa and like most of the world. And there's also the ICT market. The ICT industry is again growing at a rate that is notable in a lot of Eastern African regions, but also West and South. The International Finance Corporation estimates that there will be 230 million jobs in Africa that demand digital skills. So there's a great potential market for training and education-based companies that's been valued at around $130 billion. So obviously there is a huge gap there that companies are trying to fill in terms of ICT education and in terms of improving access to the internet and etc. And then lastly, obviously, fintech is a large market in the continent, because it basically combines the two things that a lot of the African population demand: financial freedom, and that's a bit separated from the slower banks and governmental agencies. And also because of, like I mentioned, the large youth population, Africans are actually very tech friendly, and a lot of people have mobile phones, and people send money through their phones, and even with that, still in sub-Saharan Africa, around 66% of the population is unbanked. So there's an opportunity and a huge gap that needs to be filled. Other key industries include Africa's textile industry, obviously, like that dates back pre-colonial times, and there's large and small scale enterprises that have tried to enter the market and have entered. H&M recently actually opened text mills in the continent. And there are also an abundant low-wage workers that are driving the population, growing the popularity of this industry. Also, mining is historically one of Africa's largest industries, and it's an integral part of the African economy. So companies that provide services, B2B services or technology, will also get a lot from this industry. And lastly, we can also talk about infrastructure, because there's a huge gap in infrastructure and good infrastructure in the nation. And with this growing population, the government has a huge appetite. Most governments in Africa have a huge appetite for planned infrastructure projects, and this can be in terms of increased FDI or government expenditure. So to the government, it's a means to an end to employ people, house people, and maintain their growing population. But it also brings in a huge gap that can be filled by companies from outside the region, and also companies within the region. And now that we have talked a bit about the key industries, we can also discuss their ways of doing business in this region. Some useful business tips that I have for you all is, number one is the importance of engaging with the continent and its people. As I mentioned, this Africa is huge. There's different cultures, not even within one country, not only within separate countries, but also within one country. So anyone that knows or wants to work in Africa knows that having a connection with the community is honestly something that can really help avoid unforeseen consequences of ignorance or bias, which obviously everybody in this world has. So it's important to engage as much as possible with the people by going there, face to face, meeting people. This is always very important in most African countries. Like I said, because it's such a vast region, all of this has to be taken with a grain of salt as to how you do business. And lastly, and there's also communication. Communication in the African communities can be difficult to a lot of newcomers or new entrants in the market, because the hierarchy of local authorities is compartmentalized not only within the region but within a country. So it poses some challenges, and I can say that one way to alleviate some of this is to doing your research, to understanding, to going there and communicating as much with people, and understanding how some people might see a forward approach as off-putting, and other countries find that, or other communities find that kind of approach as powerful. And so there are different ways to talk with people and make these connections with government people in the government or local tradespeople or influential figures. But it's also very key to not over assess how important these connections are. I'd always advise having a plan when meeting people, and really trying to not only understand but try to have in the back front exactly what you're trying to do, and with that also being open to understanding the gaps that may exist that lead to people acting a certain way. And this mindset and openness to communication with the population and with the communities does help a lot of entrance to the market. Also, having a sponsor is somewhat imperative in the continent, because there's a general culture of emphasis on the personal relationships with local networks. A sponsor can be valuable in terms of understanding cultural nuances, building trust, and even navigating complex regulatory landscapes. It's really important to understand that because there's basically not a lot that you can learn about the nation, about any African nation or the continent as a whole through market research or data. Having a sponsor is something that can really mitigate a lot of the risk. And it's a tried and like a winning way to do business in Africa. And again, to overcome the barriers in terms of insufficient data and cultural differences within a country, within a region, it's really important to be open to learning and listening to as much as possible about each country and each community that you're trying to do business with. One effective approach, and one that governments really look into in a positive light, is employing locals. It actually just organically integrates the business to the community, but then also it's favorable in the authorities and even potential clients. It's a big thing. It's a big topic in most African regions in terms of businesses coming into the region only and then not really engaging. So there's always going to be that gap, and employing employing locals, really being there and investing time and to learn and listen to the different cultures and nuances is really going to improve the way of doing business in this region. And one way to do this is also attending trade shows and events. I've named two here, Big Seven, Africa's Big Seven, and the Kenyan International Trade Exhibition, but there's obviously so many other ways to, so many other events and trade shows that you can attend, and it really does help having a face, putting a face to a name, and also it's a great opportunity to, look into the different types of businesses that exist in a nation or in a market. So I also have two case studies actually of European businesses that have found success. One is Agriterra, which is a company from the Netherlands. They actually work together with a lot of farming cooperative unions as well as single farms in Ethiopia. That's one of the case studies here. They were able to support Ademas Farmers Cooperative Union in the Gurage region of Ethiopia. And again, like putting time in is key because the companies like this have been in the continent since 2012. And you can see that in the way that they did two really important things. One is being in there for the long run, working since 2012. And then also they were able to support, do more than just sell their services, but also improve a lot of the standards for these farmers. And they were able to allow more women to be farmers and join the union, and all of these has actually put a positive light on their company as a whole, and also improved a lot of farmers' profitability in the region of Gurage. And then another one is Ecoligo, which is a German company. They offer solar as a service solutions for commercial and industrial companies in emerging markets, including obviously Africa. One of their significant step that they did was they tried to they worked together with a local company. Again, another key thing in doing business is finding a local partner, local sponsor. They worked with Yingeli Namane, and they were able to inaugurate a solar system in a central university in Ghana with this partner. And actually, this is just one out of the 5 kind of projects that they've done with Yingeli Namane. And 2 things that you can take out from this case study is, 1, they had a sponsor, and 2, the importance of doing something that's in line with the government goals and missions. So the Ghanaian government has a goal, a huge goal of moving towards green energy, like most of the world. And so it vastly allows companies that align with these goals to find success. That is all that I have to say about Africa and the markets and what you can potentially do and how you can do it. So if you have any questions, I've also put my email, social media, and a phone number. If anybody wants to further discuss, or if anyone has questions, we are open to taking them now.
I think maybe it was amazing, the information, and maybe it was very clear. There's someone asking, please mention the steady performer countries again.
Sure, the steady performers, I can go back to the slide. I will also share this slide for anybody that wants to engage. Steady performers include countries like Ethiopia, Rwanda, Mali, Zambia, Sierra Leone, Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique, Burkina Faso, Niger, Tanzania, and Ghana. So countries that have obviously that obviously grow at a higher than average in the past 20 years.
Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you for this amazing explanation and all the information you shared, Aiden, and hope to collaborate again soon. And you know, we are glad to have members in the chamber like Gulf Business Consulting. So thank you, Fina, also for the collaboration of the chamber in Qatar, and nothing more to say.
Thank you so much. As I mentioned, I'll be open to sharing any information and my contact details. If anybody wants to further discuss one-to-one, I'm always open.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.